been on this program before, Senator. That's right, Senator Pat Toomey. I hate the junior senator stuff. You're one of our senators. That's all. At least you're not Joe Biden, who kept saying he was our third senator.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure we only have two.
You only have two. Good. Well, look, let me start with a couple of things. You're known as the guy with the details, with the budget, and with the deficits. But last week, well, by the time this airs, 2 weeks ago, you pushed through a jobs bill that was pretty important for the middle class. It has to do with a variety of incentives for small business, dealing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. In simple language, talk with us about that.
It's all about jobs. It's all about helping to move the economy. And specifically, Terry, what we saw were a whole range of ways in which the federal government makes it really unaffordable for growing small and medium-sized companies to raise the capital they need to continue their growth. The president, to his credit, appointed a bipartisan commission of business folks and asked them, take a look at all the ways that we regulate and restrict and control the way companies raise money, and come back with recommendations of how we can facilitate that. Well, they came out with a series of ideas. We evaluated those ideas, and because I spent most of my adult life in the business world, including in financial services, some of those things really leapt off the page at me as ways that we could help a company go public, a company that was ready to do that, ways that we could help a private company stay private but raise more capital so they can grow. So I took several of those ideas, and the first thing we did was said, who's a prominent Democrat who we can work with on each of these discrete ideas so that we can get this done?
And who were some of them?
I'll tell you who some of them were. The main guy went to for the biggest, most important piece of this was Chuck Schumer. Now, Chuck Schumer and I don't agree on much.
I can understand that, Senator.
But we agreed on this, and we put together a mechanism by which medium-sized and small companies can go public without having to comply with the most expensive and onerous regulations. Tom Carper from Delaware, great job helping us develop the legislation and push it through that allows private companies to raise capital.
You have the reputation of being, a very thoughtful, low-key guy. You're not very demonstrative. I never hear you saying stupid things like some politicians do. How is this working? I mean, we hear about this extreme partisanship, the bitterness, the rancor. Is that as difficult a problem as most people think it is right now?
It's a serious problem. But there are, more than every once in a great while, we actually do come together and do something constructive, like this Jobs Act. The President's Commission made some recommendations. We introduced bipartisan legislation. It passes the House, comes over to the Senate. We went through the normal process, and we got it done. And as a result, today, growing companies will find it easier to raise the capital they need to grow more and to hire more workers. But I will be honest, Terry, that's more the exception than the rule. I am frustrated. We're not addressing the things we ought to be addressing, especially on the budget side. So it's very frustrating.
Let's run to a quick break, because I want to get into this the budget. You've been taking the lead here. We've got, depending on whose figures you want to look at, a $1.3 or $1.5 trillion deficit this year, something pushing a $16 trillion deficit, and something that Congress just simply won't do anything about is 75 million people in 2007 began to do something, turned 65. 65 to 70 trillion dollars. This is what you read from the Congressional Budget Office for Medicare and Medicaid or Social Security. When we come back, I wanted to get into, get your thoughts about what we have to do, because I know you've been heavily involved in that. We'll be back with Senator Pat Toomey following these. Hi, welcome back to the program with Senator Pat Toomey. We're talking about, of all things, budgets and deficits. Senator, it seems like it's an intractable problem. You put a budget together. Can we get a balanced budget?
Yeah, we can, Terry. It's not that hard to do, but we have lacked the political will. But, I think that these massive deficits that we're running are part of the reason the economy is underperforming. It's the threat of the huge tax increases, the inflation, if this gets monetized, if the Fed prints money to pay for all this. That threat is having a chilling effect on business investment and growth. So, plus the fact that we can see, looking across the Atlantic, how this ends. If you keep living beyond your means, and we're borrowing 40 cents of every dollar we spend. As you point out, we're running trillion-dollar deficits year after year. And in the last 4 years, we've added almost as much debt as every previous year in the history of the Republic. This is crazy.
And it seems like everybody has some program that they absolutely must have. So there's almost no program you can go and cut between the special interests that protect them. And go ahead.
But you know, this is what we get sent to Congress to do, to make the tough decisions. I'll give you an example. The budget that I introduced reaches a balance within 8 years. Okay? Doesn't do it overnight, but it does it within a reasonable time frame. Here's what we did. We cut spending in the first year by 3%. That's all. And then over the next 9 years of the 10-year budget window for which we planned, the average growth in spending is about 3% a year.
Right.
That's all you need to do. You need to hold the growth of the federal government spending to less than the economy's growing, and we'll reach a point where we get into balance. Look, it's not that it's easy, but it's not impossible by any means. We could do this.
But now you tried last year, and you just tried just recently again?
I introduced a budget. I wrote my own budget in 2011 and again in 2012. Both years I got more votes on the Senate floor than any other budget, but I didn't get a majority.
Well, the Senate hasn't adopted a budget for what? We into the third year? We're going into the third year?
No, we've gone through 3 years.
3 years.
So Harry Reid, the Democrat majority leader of the United States Senate, controls the Senate, and he is of the opinion that there's no need to do a budget. And so Republicans like me, I mean, I'm a little apoplectic about that. The idea that a $3.7 trillion federal government doesn't even have a budget to provide the guardrails over what we're going to spend and how.
I can say that. You can't. Sounds insane. You don't have to use that word,
So I've introduced my own, and I've had very broad support, almost unanimous support among Republicans, and I've had privately a number of Democrats say, you know, this makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to get it done.
So now, how about this question? As you know, we're in a pretty brutal presidential election that's turned ugly even earlier than most presidential elections. Are you optimistic at all that after we get out of this sort of we're in partisan time all the time, but through the election that there's a window maybe to get something done?
Well, there absolutely is if we win. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If Governor Romney wins this election, which I think he's likely to, then we'll almost certainly take control of the Senate. And look at it this way. The American public will have then gone through 2 consecutive election cycles, 2010 and 2012, in which they really repudiated this administration's agenda. And if it culminates in dismissing the president and hiring a new president, then I think the collective message to the political class is going to be time to change course. Let's get our budget under control. Let's have a pro-investment regulatory philosophy. Let's have simplicity and fairness on the tax code and lower marginal rates. We can get rid of some of the loopholes and write-offs.
Let's just segue just for a minute. Look, these entitlements, everybody understands they have to be reformed. Either we have to pay more or reduce some benefits. You can't, you know, and maybe providers get less. They're already arguing, hospitals and doctors, that they're already being cut. And we're not talking about a little bit of money here. I mean, we're not even talking about $16 trillion. We're talking about 65 or 70.
Yeah, the design of the big entitlement programs, especially Medicare and Medicaid, is not sustainable. No program can grow faster than the economy indefinitely because, by definition, it's just math. It will consume everything. But here's the point. First of all, we don't have to change the rules of the game for anyone who's already retired. We could have the changes go into effect 10 years from now. There's one exception to that. I've advocated in Medicare, the program by which we provide health care for elderly people, people over 65. I think it's crazy that we don't ask wealthy retirees to pay a little more for this. Why in the way? So that's something I would do.
It makes sense.
I would do that immediately. But the structural changes need to change incentives so that people have more ownership, have more rational utilization. Medicaid, frankly, we should let governors and state legislatures make more decisions. So we could block grant Medicaid to the states, free them up to be more flexible about delivering health care to poor people. We could make some changes in Medicare so individuals would have more say in the kind of policy they got and would have more incentive to control costs. We could do these things. The bipartisan plans are on the table that I've supported. Unfortunately, we're in this gridlock.
All right, we're going to run doing. We're talking about paying. You know, we have commercials. We have to pay. We have to pay the bills. When we come back, I want to ask you about the Affordable Care Act, and you know, a bunch of states. Governors, I think 6 or 7, have flatly said they're not going to participate. Governor Corbett has not indicated what he's likely to do. I want to ask you a couple questions about Affordable Care Act, and then before we leave today, maybe you know that you weren't going to get out of here without having asked you about the vice presidency. I know what you're going to say, but we're going to ask you anyway. We'll be back with Senator Toomey in a moment. All right, welcome back to the program with Senator Toomey. Senator, the Affordable Care Act, we won't get into the constitutionality of it. That decision was made. We'll see what its impact is. But some states, for example, are not participating in the Medicaid part. And if we understand the Supreme Court decision, the feds can't take their money away, you know, the rest of their money away.
Right.
Have you given any thought about the Medicaid program? Do I have to ask you that? I know you have. Yeah. The block grants, you were talking about more flexibility. What do you think ought to happen?
Yeah, see, the problem is we tie the state's hands, and we tie them with very strict rules about how Medicaid can be administered. As you know, the cost of Medicaid is rising faster than any other big government program. It's rising much faster than the economy, and it's devastating state budgets. You want to know why so many states are cutting back their funding for education? It's because Medicaid costs are squeezing out everything else. Yeah. And so a lot of governors have come to us and said, hey, could you let us figure this out? There are better ways to run Medicaid, to serve health care needs of poor people than the way you force us to do it.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, the Obamacare legislation moves in the opposite direction. It says to the states, now you have to expand this program that's already unaffordable, and say, well, we'll pick up the tab for the first year, and then we'll pick up most of the tab the next year, and then we're silent about what happens after that. And I think about 16 million people would be added to the Medicaid rolls, as I understand it. Well, yeah, and it's already unaffordable. So do we really want to make this a general working class entitlement, which used to be something just for the poorest people in our society, and do we want to force that on the states? I think we want to give states more flexibility. I mean, one of the things I hear from hospitals, and you know, we have regular experts from our hospitals who come on, is that they've got to treat many of these patients anyway, and they don't get reimbursed for it. So, and they have to pick up the cost because legally they're required to do it. You know, hospital's not going to turn somebody down anyway, as you know. Right. So, I mean, is there a way out of that problem? Well, it's tough. I mean, I think people ought to be made to pay for what they consume if they can afford it. Sure. And so Medicaid should be there for the people who are, you know, really truly need it and have no alternative. But you know, we've had so many policies that make health care more expensive than it needs to be, make health insurance. Look, we've got 44 mandates in Pennsylvania of things that an insurance company has to do. So that means your policy is more expensive than it has to be. All right, before you get out of here, and I know you knew I was going to ask you this question about the vice presidency. I mean, lately, you know, your name has appeared. I mean, you know, you're a new member, but you were in Congress for 3 terms. It's not like you don't know what's going on in Washington. But, you know, what do you think? You're waiting for the phone. I'm not waiting by the phone. Look, first of all, I love my job. This is a great challenge, but a tremendous honor and opportunity to represent the people of Pennsylvania in the United States Senate. I intend to stay right here and keep doing this work. I do think, I'm convinced, that Governor Romney is a very thoughtful, very methodical, very analytical kind of guy, and he's going to make a very careful decision. And there's a deep bench, Terry. There's lots of very well-qualified governors and senators and people outside of elective office who could do a great job. I'm sure he'll make a good choice. Yeah. Well, as you know, it's going to be a very close campaign. I noticed, I mean, all the polls show it's about a 2-point lead for the president nationally, has a bigger lead in our state. And I noticed you've been getting a little more active. You were at an opening. You're going to go out and you've been campaigning for Romney? Yes, actively, and I will continue. I just think so much depends on this. Terry, you know, I think President Obama's a likable guy, no question about that, but his policies have been really bad for this country, and Governor Romney knows what it takes to get an economy moving, to get jobs created, and we really don't have any time to lose. We've got to turn this around, and he can do it. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. You're welcome to come on anytime. One of the things that I've been delighted about, and I think I say this as an independent, is the way that you and Senator Casey, you don't always vote together, but you get along, you cooperate with each other. I think that's only good for our state. Well, thanks. You know, you can disagree without being disagreeable. Absolutely. All right, our popular financial literacy update is next after we turn